Imagine you are sitting in closed conference rooms in Washington, D.C. On the massive screen in front of you are satellite images, seaports, air bases, aircraft carriers, hundreds of fighter jets lined up in neat rows like chess pieces on an enormous board. And the man sitting in the head of the table, the one who ordered all of this here, is furrowing in brow and asking the question that many people are probably wondering themselves. Why hasn't they surrendered that? That is exactly what Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump invited to the Middle East, and beyond said to Fox News on February 21st, 2026. He recounted that the American president can understand why Iran had not capitulated to Washington's demand regarding its nuclear programs, given that American military power is pressing down on the Islamic Republic like a colossal boulder. That seemingly simple question conceals within it one of the most complex and dangerous situations just matches in the world today.
And today, we're going to go deep into that chess match together. We'll understand why Iran is so stubborn, what cards America is actually holding, and what happens if the negotiating table collapses. But first, let's start with something many people tend to overlook: historical context. Because without history, you'll never understand why these two nations hate each other down to their very bones. In 1953, the CIA, in coordination with British intelligence, overthrew Iran's Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, a legitimately elected Democrat, simply because he dared to nationalize the oil industry. They installed Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who ruled Iran like a king with his notorious secret police Savak. Thousands were tortured, killed, disappeared. Then in 1979, the Islamic Revolution erupted. The Iranian people overthrew the Shah, and they screamed that this was revenge for decades of Western manipulation. The American embassy in Tehran was seized. 52 American citizens were held hostage for 444 days. From that point on, the US and Iran had no formal diplomatic relations. Two enemies who haven't looked each other in the face for nearly half a century. That is the foundation of this enmity, not just politics, not just nuclear weapons. This is a historical wound that has never healed, layered over by decades of sanctions, proxy wars, assassinations, and threats. Understanding this, you'll understand why Iranians don't simply surrender just because they see an American aircraft carrier anchored offshore. But now let's return to the present and look at the scale of the military force America has assembled in the region. This is no small matter. This is the largest American overseas military display in more than 2 decades. More than one-third of all available US Navy warships, over 200 fighter jets, a supporting fleet of AWACS, early warning aircraft, aerial tankers, electronic warfare planes, and rescue aircraft. That's before counting the hundreds of Tomahawk cruise missiles that can be launched from warships. On February 19th, a formation of E-3 AWACS aircraft capable of coordinating dozens of complex sorties simultaneously flew along Israel's Mediterranean coast at over 9,000 meters altitude in the afternoon sun. Clearly visible to anyone who looked up, this was not accidental. This was a deliberately sent message. The destination was a Saudi Arabian airbase where American troops are stationed, ready to coordinate complex air operations if war breaks out. A retired Israeli Air Force general named Eden Atias said it plainly. The abundance of assets America now has in the theater clearly reflects the intention that this will not be just a one-off sortie, but a sustained air campaign with repeating missions and continuous presence in Iranian airspace. In plain terms, this is preparation for real war, not just firing one shot and walking away. So, what has America done with this force so far? Back in June, Trump acted. He sent 7 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, the most expensive aircraft in the world, flying 18 hours from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, halfway around the globe, to drop bunker-busting bombs on Iran's nuclear facilities. That was a powerful punch, but the results were still not enough to force Iran to sit down and sign any agreement. And that brings us to the central question of today's story. If Trump decides to strike again, what options does he have? American generals are weighing a range of scenarios. Let's walk through each option slowly so you can understand every step of thinking in this chess match. The first option, and perhaps the most audacious, is to strike directly at the leadership, meaning aiming at Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and those close to him. This is the cut off the snake's head tactic, with the hope that once the leader is eliminated, a more moderate figure, more willing to negotiate, more amenable to America will rise to power. Trump appears to be borrowing from the Venezuela playbook, where pressure from multiple directions forced a power shift in a direction more favorable to Washington. But this is where people who truly understand this region will tell you Iran is not as simple as Venezuela. There is a very large problem currently unfolding within Iran. Last month, the Tehran regime opened fire on protesters, carrying out a mass slaughter. People who took to the streets demanding freedom, demanding a dignified life, were shot dead on their own streets by their own government. And Trump had promised to stand with those protesters. So now, if America topples Khamenei and installs someone else from the old system, how will the Iranian people feel? They'll feel betrayed. The man who promised to protect them is now shaking hands with their enemy in exchange for a nuclear deal. That anger could easily transform into violence aimed not only at the regime but at American presence in the region as well. The second option is to target the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, or the IRGC. This is Iran's most powerful armed force, not just a military, but an economic empire, a political machine, and the violent arm of the regime. They participate in the bloody suppression of the recent protests. The IRGC has a vast network stretching from bases within Iran to proxy forces spread across Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and beyond. The US could target IRGC headquarters inside the country, could attempt to eliminate their leadership. This is a more surgical type of strike, with less risk of escalation than killing Khamenei, but also unlikely to be enough to fundamentally change the political landscape. The third option is to destroy Iran's ballistic missile bases. This is a very real security priority because these missiles pose a direct threat to American military bases in the region and to Washington's allies. Iran demonstrated during the 1-2-day war with Israel in June that even when Israel gained air superiority over Iran and conducted hundreds of unimpeded strikes, Tehran was still capable of launching waves of missiles for the entire duration. That shows Iran's missile stockpile is both vast and well protected, dispersed, and buried in deep bunkers inside mountains, in locations that cannot easily be wiped out by a few rounds of airstrikes. The fourth option is to once again attack Iran's remaining nuclear facilities. This is essentially the most fundamental reason for the entire confrontation. But one thing must be emphasized that many people don't know. Iran's nuclear program is not concentrated in one or two locations. It is dispersed, hidden underground, in places like Fordo, bored deep into the heart of a mountain, to the point that even America's GBU 57 bunker buster, a bomb weighing nearly 14 tons, and the most powerful non-nuclear weapon in the world, cannot guarantee complete destruction. This is not a war that can be won easily with bombs. And the final option, the most frightening, is to combine everything, strike simultaneously at the leadership, the IRGC, the missiles, the nuclear sites, and other military targets in a comprehensive campaign. Even a limited strike against the IRGC could be paired with a massive effort to preempt and neutralize Iran's retaliatory capability, meaning America would try to knock out Iran's defenses before Iran can fire back. To do this, the US has significantly upgraded its missile defense in the region. THAAD systems designed to intercept ballistic missiles at high altitude have been flown in. Patriot batteries for shorter range defense have also been deployed. Added to that are squadrons of F-15E fighters with guided rockets specifically designed to shoot down Iranian drones and cruise missiles. Now let's look at the other side of the board. What cards is Iran holding? No one would describe Iran as a military superpower. Iran's air force is small and consists mostly of old American aircraft purchased during the Shah's era, meaning before 1979, over half a century old. Spare parts are sanctioned. Iran's actual aerial combat capability is negligible in a confrontation with the United States. But Tehran is not stupid. They've known their weakness for a long time, and they've spent decades building what they do have: ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and long-range drones. Iran has turned missiles into its primary deterrence force, much like North Korea uses nuclear weapons as a shield. This arsenal is large, diverse, and dispersed in such a way that even a powerful airstrike campaign cannot destroy it entirely before Iran manages to fire. The 1-2-day war with Israel proved that. And more alarmingly, if Iran feels it has nothing left to lose, it will fire everything in every direction. A senior Israeli officer analyzed it very sharply. In previous rounds of confrontation, all sides understood these were limited strikes and everyone was looking for an off-ramp. But this time is different. The scale of forces America has deployed and the talk of regime change could lead Iran's leaders to believe they are facing annihilation. And at that point, they would decide to fire everything in every direction. Iran is already calculating strikes on American bases across the Gulf region, particularly in Qatar, as it did last summer. It could also strike Israel once again, though that would mean dragging yet another enemy into the war. And here is Iran's trump card: its proxy network. Hezbollah in Lebanon, Houthi forces in Yemen, Iranian-aligned armed groups in Iraq and Syria, all armed, trained, and funded by Tehran. If Iran gives the order, thousands of missiles and drones would be launched from multiple directions simultaneously, targeting Israel, American bases, and Washington's allies across the region. Nobody knows whether even the most sophisticated missile defense systems could intercept all of that in a saturated, simultaneous attack. This is why this chess match is so dangerous. Not because one side is overwhelmingly stronger and will win quickly, but because both sides are miscalculating each other, and just one miscalculation is enough to drag the entire region into a spiral of violence with no end. Meanwhile, the negotiating table has not completely shut. Talks between American envoys and Iranian counterparts are expected to continue in Geneva on February 26th. Trump has repeatedly said he wants a diplomatic solution. But as Witkoff admitted, despite the enormous military pressure, it is still very hard to force Iran to clearly declare that it doesn't want nuclear weapons and is prepared to prove it. Iran is demanding much in return: sanctions relief, security guarantees, and most importantly, assurance that the regime will not be overthrown. This is a demand that Washington, with voices still calling for regime change, can hardly commit to credibly. And here is the core contradiction that The Economist points out with considerable frankness. Trump is trying to achieve too many things simultaneously, and those things contradict each other. On one hand, he wants a nuclear deal that requires Iran to survive as a government capable of signing and enforcing a treaty. On the other hand, he speaks of regime change overthrowing Iran's current government. But no government signs a nuclear deal with the party plotting to overthrow it. He also promised to stand with Iranian protesters. But if America strikes Iran and installs an old face from the same regime, Iranians will see that as betrayal. Those three objectives cannot coexist. No one can win everything on the same chessboard. And now, let's talk about the biggest trap Washington has always fallen into in the Middle East. That is the illusion that military power can produce political change on demand. Iraq in 2003 is the most costly lesson. The US dismantled Saddam Hussein's army in weeks, then got stuck there for over 20 years in an endless civil war that consumed trillions of dollars and tens of thousands of lives. Afghanistan was even worse: 20 years of war, trillions of dollars, and then the Taliban returned as if nothing had happened. Iran is not Iraq or Afghanistan. Iran is a nation of 90 million people with a civilization spanning thousands of years, a complex state apparatus, a highly educated middle class, and a very powerful national identity. Even many Iranians who despise their own Islamic regime would pick up arms to defend their country from foreign invasion. That is the natural reflex of any people. One can simultaneously hate one's own government and hate the foreigners who come to bomb one's country. Those two things are not contradictory. Beyond that, maintaining the current level of military readiness is extraordinarily expensive. Operating one or two carrier strike groups, sustaining hundreds of combat aircraft and thousands of troops in the region burns through millions of dollars every single day. In the long run, it also weakens American presence in other parts of the world. For instance, in the Pacific, where China is watching every move with close attention. So ultimately, Trump is facing a strategic impasse. He holds in his hands the most powerful military machine in human history. But military power is not a master key. It can destroy, but it cannot build. It can coerce in the short term, but it cannot replace genuine political change from within. Limited airstrikes will not be enough to pressure Iran into concessions sufficient for Trump to declare a diplomatic victory. A large-scale attack aimed at toppling the regime could drag America into a protracted war with no exit. And no one believes that's what Trump wants. He has made clear many times that he wants no more forever wars. But here is the most dangerous inflection point. When both sides are escalating, both piling more pieces onto the board, both testing each other's limits, the risk of accidental miscalculation grows with each passing day. Neither side wants all-out war. But war doesn't always happen because someone wants it. Sometimes it happens because no one was clever enough to stop it. History has taught us that lesson many times. In 1914, no one in Europe wanted World War I, but a series of miscalculations, misunderstood commitments, and threats taken too seriously turned the assassination of one archduke into a slaughter that killed 20 million people. Today, we are watching two sides standing at the edge of an abyss. America with hundreds of warplanes and warships waiting for orders, Iran with thousands of missiles in their launch silos, fingers hovering over the trigger. And between them, the talks in Geneva fragile as a single thin thread. The question is not whether America has the power to strike Iran. The answer is yes. Obviously, the question is whether that power, once used, will produce the outcome America wants. And on that front, the answer is far from clear. There is a profound paradox at the heart of this story. The most powerful nation on earth, with an arsenal capable of destroying everything in its path, finds itself trapped by its own strength. Because the greater the power, the heavier the responsibility for consequences. The more forces you put on the board, the greater the pressure to use them. And once you use them, there is no going back. Perhaps this is the greatest question this entire story poses, not just for Trump, not just for Iran, but for all of us as we reflect on the world we live in. His absolute power, without absolute wisdom and patience to match it. Truly a strength, or is it a weakness? And if you were the one sitting at the head of that table, staring at a screen showing hundreds of warships and aircraft waiting for your order, what would you do?